What you are about to hear is going to make your blood boil. WWE just took one of the most dominant, most electrifying, most physically gifted superstars on their entire roster, a man who has looked like an absolute monster every single time he has stepped between those ropes, and they quietly, casually, almost insultingly slid him onto WWE main event, like he was some enhancement talent nobody cares about. Oba Femi on main event. Let that sink in for a second. This is the same man who held the NXT championship like it was his birthright. The same man who stood in that ring and made veterans look like rookies. The same man who every single time the lights hit that ridiculous physique made every single person watching think, this guy is going to be a star. And WWE's response? Here's your main event slot, champ. Go perform for the 12 people who remember that show still exists. I'm your host, and this is WrestleScope. And today, we are going deep on what is happening with Oba Femi, why this main event placement is either the biggest red flag of 2024 or the most misunderstood chess move in recent WWE history, and why you need to be furious either way. Stay until the end, because we've got a twist to this story that nobody else is talking about, and trust me, it changes everything. Let's get into it. Before we talk about the disrespect, let's establish the facts, because if you're somehow sleeping on Oba Femi, you need a wake-up call right now. Oba Femi is not just another big man. WWE has always had big men. 7-footers who can barely move, powerhouses who gas out after 3 minutes, giants who look impressive in photos and fall apart under pressure. Oba Femi is categorically different, and that's not hype. That's just what your eyes tell you when you watch him. This man is an athlete first, born in Nigeria, trained to near perfection, and carrying a combination of size, speed, and in-ring instinct that you genuinely do not see very often. When he was dominating NXT, it wasn't just that he was winning, it was how he was winning. He was making credible superstars look completely outmatched. He carried himself with a quiet, cold arrogance that didn't need a microphone to communicate. You just felt it radiating off him. His NXT championship reign was the kind of run that should have been a launching pad, the kind of run that gets people talking in locker rooms, the kind of run that, historically, has been the first chapter of a main roster success story. So when he got called up, the wrestling world collectively leaned forward. Finally, here comes the next big thing. Here comes WWE's solution to needing a new dominant force at the top of the card. And then, main event. Now look, some of you might be saying, calm down, main event is just a TV taping, it's not a big deal. And I want to address that directly because that kind of thinking is exactly why WWE gets away with mishandling talent for years at a time. WWE Main Event, for those who don't know, is a show that airs on Peacock and WWE Network. It tapes before Raw, it features almost exclusively mid-card and lower-card talent working relatively short matches that don't carry any real storyline consequence. It is, for all intents and purposes, a house show that gets filmed. Now, that's not a knock on every person who appears on Main Event, but here's the critical difference. Appearing on Main Event as a veteran keeping yourself sharp is one thing. Being assigned to Main Event as a freshly called-up superstar who should be making an enormous impact on Raw or SmackDown, that is an entirely different conversation. When you call someone up from NXT, especially someone who was the champion, someone who was positioned as the future, the expectation is that you are going to integrate them into meaningful programming. You give them a debut that lands. You give them an opponent that matters. You give them a story. What Oba Femi got instead was a quiet slot on a secondary show, away from the main audience, away from the storylines, away from the spotlight that he had worked for years to deserve. And here's what makes this particularly infuriating. WWE has done this before. They have a pattern, and it is ugly. Talented superstars get called up from NXT, get quietly buried under meaningless appearances, lose momentum, lose crowd connection, and then spend the next 2 years trying to claw their way back to relevance. We've watched it happen over and over again, and every time it happens, the fans are the ones who suffer, because we lose out on what could have been something special. Are we really about to watch it happen to Oba Femi? Alright, here's where I told you there's a twist, and I meant it. Because as furious as the surface-level reading of this situation makes me, I've been doing this long enough to know that not everything in WWE is as simple as it looks, and there is an argument to be made that this main event placement might not be the catastrophe it appears to be. Hear me out.
There is a school of thought in professional wrestling that says the worst thing you can do with a powerhouse character, especially one who is still relatively fresh to a mainstream audience, is throw them into a high-profile feud before the audience has had time to truly understand who they are. Think about it. The main roster audience is enormous, and a significant portion of that audience doesn't watch NXT. They haven't seen Obafemi work. They don't know his mannerisms, his moveset, his presence. They don't have that emotional relationship with him yet. And if you throw an unfamiliar face directly into a major program without building any of that foundation, you risk one of the most dangerous outcomes in professional wrestling: indifference. The crowd doesn't boo, the crowd doesn't cheer, the crowd just sits there, and a quiet crowd is the death of a career. So the counter-argument is this: maybe, WWE is using main event tapings to let Obafemi work in front of a live crowd, sharpen his main roster instincts, get comfortable with the pace and the environment, and build toward a debut moment that actually lands with the full audience behind it. The Roman Reigns playbook, if you will. Build slowly, build deliberately, and when the moment comes, make sure the foundation is solid enough to hold the weight of a major push. That's the optimistic reading. That's the WWE knows what they're doing reading. But here's the problem with that argument, and it's a significant one. Roman Reigns had the Shield. Roman Reigns had years of television time alongside established stars. Roman Reigns had name recognition built organically through association. He had a runway. What runway is Obafemi getting on main event? Because right now, all I see is a holding pattern with no visible endpoint and no communicated plan. And in professional wrestling, momentum is the most fragile, most irreplaceable resource a superstar has. Once it's gone, getting it back is one of the hardest things in this industry. Every week Obafemi is on main event instead of Raw or SmackDown is a week the main roster audience isn't thinking about him. And the wrestling news cycle moves fast. The audience's attention moves fast. WWE cannot afford to let this man become background noise. So where do we go from here? What does the right version of this story look like? Because I am not here just to complain. I am here to talk about what needs to happen and what the WWE universe should be demanding. First, Obafemi needs a proper main roster introduction, not a squash match on main event that gets cut together into a highlight clip. A real, televised Raw or SmackDown debut with production value behind it, with vignette packages that tells his story, with an entrance that uses the full arena atmosphere to make the audience feel something the moment he walks through that curtain. Second, he needs an opponent with credibility, not a jobber, not an enhancement match, someone with a name that means something to the audience, a match that tells the audience this new person is at this level, take them seriously. Third, and this is the big one, he needs a character direction. What is Obafemi's story on the main roster? What does he want? Who does he hate? What makes him tick beyond the physical dominance? Because physical dominance alone doesn't make a long-term star. It makes a highlight reel. The great ones have a reason, and right now the audience doesn't know Obafemi's reason. Figure those three things out, execute them with intention, and you have the beginning of something genuinely special. Fail to figure those things out, and you have the next chapter of a very familiar, very depressing story about wasted potential. WWE is at a genuinely exciting creative moment right now. The product has been stronger, the storytelling has been more coherent, the audience investment is real. This is not the time to let talent fall through the cracks, and Obafemi, this man with this much potential, should not be falling through any cracks. Here's what I know for certain after everything we just broke down.
Obafemi is too talented, too physically gifted, and too much of a generational prospect to be wasted. And the worst outcome, the outcome we absolutely cannot allow to happen through silence, is that WWE quietly buries him in obscurity while we all look the other way. The WWE universe has a voice, and that voice matters more than you think. The comment sections, the social media conversations, the fan reactions, they are data for a company that is constantly watching what resonates. So use that voice. Here's what I need from you right now. If you believe Obafemi deserves better, if you think this main event situation is a red flag that needs to be talked about, drop a comment below. Tell me what you think WWE should do with him. Tell me who you want to see him feud with first. Tell me whether you think this is disrespect or a slow burn plan. Let's have that conversation, because this community is one of the smartest wrestling communities on the internet, and your takes genuinely deserve to be heard. Share this video, because every wrestling fan you know needs to know what's happening with Obafemi, and every share is a chance to grow this conversation and put pressure where pressure needs to be. Like the video. If WrestleScope gave you something to think about today, it helps the channel more than you know, and it tells YouTube that wrestling content done right deserves to be seen. And if you are not yet subscribed to WrestleScope, what are you doing?